couple of armchair GMs who have yet to be wrong with any of their Timberwolves takes. Right. It's Flagrant Howls with Phil Mackey and Kyle Theige.
All right. We're alive. We are alive. Flagrant Howls faithful. Appreciate all your support here during these difficult, tumultuous morning times. We are now a week since a week and change since the Timberwolves season unceremoniously came to an end, and we're here to, I think, give our distanced thoughts on. It's been a week since the season ended, so let's give our thoughts now that we've had some time to collect ourselves and then look ahead. We've heard from all the key players in their postseason press conferences: the Tim Connellys, the Karl-Anthony Townses of the world, and the Chris Finches. So, Kyle, what is, now that you've had a week to sit on this thing, what is the number one thing on your mind as it pertains to the Timberwolves heading into the offseason?
I still think it's who is making the decisions, right? Because there was that kind of infamous, I think Tim Connelly started exit interviews. Obviously, like you said, Chris Finch spoke, Karl-Anthony Towns spoke. I think Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert was too big for the podium up there, literally like a big man with it.
His feet were like sticking out like a cartoon character, right. Little white tennis shoes.
I should say it was disappointing that like Anthony Edwards didn't speak. I think maybe they used that whole chair throwing incident, which we haven't really talked about either, which was one of the dumbest things in the world. I know you were pretty opinionated about that, but no, I think overall it was exit interviews are pretty. They're more important than media day, but they're still pretty useless. But I mean, you got some things out of Tim Connelly. He said he's pretty committed to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which I couldn't stop thinking that if I told my wife I was pretty committed to the marriage, that wouldn't go well.
Some of the beat writers are saying that, hey, I just saw the quote too, that his tone was more, but you're right. Like he said, I'm pretty committed to the Timberwolves. Are you pretty committed? Are you fully committed? Do we want him to be pretty fully committed or
right.
pretty committed? I don't know.
I will say he said it, I think during that or when he was in Denver doing kind of holding court with the media, that he's been doing this for like 25 years. He is, no matter what we think about the Gobert trade, he is really well respected. Like I always bring back the summer league stuff. Like you talk to other people, they're like, "Oh, I work for the Kings or I work for the Hornets." It's like, yeah dude, Tim Connelly's great to work with. He might just not be a great public speaker or in those, and he admitted that day too. But yeah, I just could have done that better. You could have been like, "Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not trying to get out of here. I signed a 4 or 5 year deal for a lot of money. I'm sticking here." But then also too, I mean, some of the stories that came out of that, they did say that they like their starting five, which okay. That kind of means they probably are going to lean into the run it back, use the excuses of the injuries and a chaotic season to try to give it another chance. But as John Krasinski wrote coming out of exit interviews, is like they did admit that, okay, we know whose team this is. It's Anthony Edwards' team. Yeah. Everything we do is going to be around Anthony Edwards. Maybe not at the level yet where like, I mean, he is 21. We're not going to give him roster decisions, but every move we make that's basketball centric has to be around how does it fit this kid, because he has shown, unlike Karl-Anthony Towns or even Rudy Gobert, think of all the things that had to happen this year to like, we got to prop up Rudy, we got to get rid of D'Lo, we got to get Mike Conley, we got to do this, we got to do that, like we got to fly the French flag on the plane. Ant's just, he doesn't need that stuff, and he still can he can sail the ship amongst choppy water. So it was cool to hear them say like, yeah, everything we do moving forward is going to be about Ant. But outside of that, it was just, they do seem like they're going to run it back with Finch and Tim Connelly and the starting five. So whether people like that or not, it's probably the safest option for now. And then you just kind of figure out that next big chess move, whether it be at the trade deadline of 2024 or next offseason.
Yeah, I think you hit on my biggest takeaway. It did come from Tim Connelly, like you said, that this is Anthony Edwards' team going forward. And and that's such a, I think people sometimes hate when we say that, but because it's such a nebulous, it's his team. Well, it's really like there's 15 guys on a roster or whatever, and it's like Chris Finch's team too. But what he meant by that is, like you said, all of the moves going forward are going to have to be made with how do we maximize Anthony Edwards and how do we maximize the team with Anthony Edwards as the centerpiece. And Tim Connelly also said he's the best 21-year-old basketball player in the world and has potential to be one of the best players in the NBA. And the pressure is on me and the organization to make sure that he sees that through. and he's already sort of scratching the surface of being one of the best players in the NBA. There's a lot of work there. I mean, that Lakers playing game performance, that can't happen.
Yep.
There's a lot of nights where he just doesn't want to play defense. And Johnny K in his athletic piece brought up a good point too about when you're getting double teamed in that Nuggets series, and it's game 3, it's game 4, it's game 5. They've scouted everything. They know all your tendencies, and they're trapping you in the half court. You're gonna have to pass the ball to Rudy Gobert sometimes.
Yeah,
and so there's some things like that. I just want to make it clear that even though this is very, very much a this is an Anthony Edwards stan podcast. Let's not pretend like he's a finished product that has, no criticism coming his way. He needs to get better in some certain ways too. But I agree with Tim Connelly. It became very evident in that postseason series against the Nuggets that he's a guy you can reliably build around, a guy that ascends when the light is the brightest, and a guy that works his ass off and adds a layer to his game every year. So I feel good about the Wolves' stance on that. Now it opens up a bunch of other questions, Kyle. Okay, if Anthony's the centerpiece of this, does that mean that you're going to run the whole thing back? Does that make the most sense? Does it make sense to trade Karl-Anthony Towns now while his value is still pretty high? Does it make sense to move off Rudy? All these questions over the next 2 months have to be addressed. But they're in a different position now with how they view Edwards than they were a year ago, and that's really important.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm going to try to give them any credit or I agree with that stance, is that there wasn't this overarching we have to blow it up or we have to make this panic move. I mean, I wouldn't say the Gobert trade last July was a panic move, but it was like you tasted a little bit of success and okay, let's just go all in. Yeah. I'm going to try really hard to get people to stop saying all in, because if you know anything about card or playing poker, as you and I do, the Wolves aren't all in. Whether you like it or not, they're not. They're pot committed to this experiment, but all in is, if I go all in on the poker table, I'm putting my Anthony Edwards chip in the middle. They haven't done that. They still have Ant, they still have Jaden, but they're very pot committed to this with the draft capital they traded up. So, yeah, they're going to try to, figure it out. The one thing I've learned is after the Wolves get bounced and get made fun of for 24 hours, it's then you look around and the Hawks get bounced and they get made fun of and their future looks maybe even less bright than the Wolves. There's every team that gets eliminated from the postseason now, most of them have a guy over 30, so that puts them already kind of in a more panic situation than the Timberwolves are. And a lot of those guys don't have a blue chipper. Like Tim said at exit interviews, Anthony Edwards is the best 21-year-old, I think, in the world. The Athletic did a pretty cool under 23 mock draft with some of their writers the other day. And so under 23 eliminates Jason Tatum. But round 1, first pick overall, they took Anthony Edwards over John Morant, over Zion Williamson, over Evan Mobley. So we all kind of see the vision, and it's good now that they're at least saying that, because that's not something they were saying 12 months ago. And I mean, I don't know if we were saying it 12 months ago, because Ant was great against the Grizzlies a year ago in the playoffs, but he wasn't what he is now. He wasn't an all-star. He wasn't the two-way guy more consistently. There's still, like Johnny K said, Ant has perfected almost at 21 playing one-on-one basketball. But to be that guy, you have to be able to perfect playing 5-on-5 basketball. You have to know when to get off of it. Yes, that includes throwing the ball to Rudy Gobert every now and then. And that's something he's going to have to work on this summer. But bright future ahead for him. Still think a bright future for the Wolves. But big decisions. Every offseason now, there's going to be big decisions for this roster and how they kind of build it around him.
Yep. So I do have, maybe I'll give you a little sampling of this, but because people can go find this full episode on the Minnesota Sports with Mackey and Judd podcast.
This is a good one.
I have 5 Karl-Anthony Towns trade ideas. Did you listen to that at all?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, instead of going through the full list again, and you and I will have plenty of time to flesh it out. If you, let's say the front office said today, okay, as part of our Anthony Edwards is the centerpiece plan here, it's not that we don't like him and Cat. Those guys like each other. They get along. There's some chemistry. I think they actually play pretty well off of each other. But if they decided we need to leverage this asset into more assets, and that's the direction we're going to go, we're going to trade Karl-Anthony Towns. Would you want it to be for an established player, like if the Celtics get beat in the second round or something, and they decide it's time to trade Jaylen Brown? He's got 1 year left in his deal. Or would you rather it be for maybe a couple of younger pieces, like I floated the Knicks idea, like an Emmanuel Quickley and somebody else, and then 2 or 3 first-round draft picks? Which path would you like them to explore if they decided to trade Karl-Anthony Towns?
It's kind of a loaded question because selfishly
You don't want to trade him.
Well, not that I don't want to trade him. I don't at this point. But if I did, I also want a little bit of both. Like the Jaylen Brown thing is super interesting because
And 5 first-round picks. We'll take Jaylen Brown, 5 first-round picks.
Yeah, exactly.
And
he actually has. I think he's from Atlanta. Like him and Ant actually have like a pretty detailed friendship and history. So that's like, okay, that's great. Let's, I think Ant's going to sign his max extension this summer and everything will be good. And we've talked about that before. But I also don't think. I mean, if you want just a dose of pessimism, the way the NBA works, I would probably bet my life that Anthony Edwards doesn't play his whole career in Minnesota. That's just how the league. For every Steph Curry, well, I mean, just like for every Steph Curry, there's a bunch of Kevin Durant's or guys that do bounce around every now and then.
Negative.
So
you're already a classic tortured Timberwolves fan, though.
Yeah.
I've
moved on to the Kraken, baby.
Right? You people get mad at me too because Mackey, you run all these guys out of town, then they go win championships. First, it was Ricky Rubio and Kevin Love. And then you wanted Wiggins ran out of town, and now you want Karl-Anthony Towns ran out of town. It's like, well, first of all, Andrew Wiggins joining up with a dynasty and then winning a championship doesn't prove your point about you should have kept out. Like Wiggins was the centerpiece here. Again, I keep saying this about Towns. If there's a way for Towns to organically become the third guy on a team that features Anthony Edwards as the main centerpiece, and then another awesome player, maybe Jaden McDaniels turns into Kawhi Leonard or something in 2 or 3 years. And then Karl-Anthony Towns is there as a great complimentary Kevin Love on the Cavs type piece. Sign me up, dude. Sign me up for that. It's just really hard salary-wise and ego-wise to make that happen. So just wanted
and just to clarify, I don't think there's any rumblings or any issues whatsoever. It's just when you watch the league, I mean, look at the Lakers roster. It's just all dudes that were top draft picks that then left their team and went out. I mean, it's just how the league works. So I think Ant's fine. I would hope that Ant has more of a Devin Booker career where he gets through the lean years and they keep taking swings. They go for Chris Paul. They go for Kevin Durant. So that goes back to this Karl trade hypothesis is a Jaylen Brown would be great because that's a guy that fits right now, fits a window. Or the one I didn't like, if you want my direct opinion, the Knicks one, I think Obi Toppin is not good. I think Obi Toppin is fart away from 30 years old. I mean, he was drafted as an old rookie. And then Emmanuel Quickley, it's okay, yeah, that'd be great. And I saw what you're trying to do. That's kind of more of add some guys that fit his timeline more. But if you do move Karl, again, people that get mad about that, it's probably because you admit that he just has more value than Rudy and you're maybe too pot committed. It's well, we got to get more assets, so we kind of already screwed ourselves by going for Rudy, so now we have to move Karl. But yeah, I would want some sort of contributor now and some picks so you just kind of restack. But I also know that I don't want, if you trade Karl, this team to take a step back because going back to the exit interviews, Tim Connelly said this, I think Chris Finch said this, there is a massive, massive importance in putting Ant in games that matter compared to Jalen Green in Houston or LaMelo Ball with the Hornets. The playoffs are the expectation, whether, I know it's the Minnesota Timberwolves, but every year moving forward, this team should be one of the top 8 teams, maybe 10 teams, whatever. You don't want Ant to start settling into bad habits where he's on a lottery team or he's on a tanking team by any means. So if you do move Karl, whether it be this summer or next summer, you do move Rudy, it needs to be for guys that are either fit the window of Ant and Jaden or can come in and contribute like a Mike Conley did, some of these other, Kyle Anderson has done since signing here. But your trade ideas weren't bad. I just didn't like the Knicks one because I don't think those Knicks picks will ever be good, and I'm just so an Ant or an Obi Toppin hater.
And it's for me, it's way, 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 way more about a guy like Emmanuel Quickley, who I think he's playing behind Jalen Brunson, former Kentucky kid. He was a later first-round pick, I want to say 20-something, and he has one of the things I love about him is he would come in and instantly be the successor to Mike. He'd probably come off the bench the first year, just like he is in New York, and then he would emerge into his mid-20s as your starting ball handler. He has added layers to his game all 3 years he's been in the NBA, and but he's a bench player. Well, Tom Thibodeau plays a 6-man rotation.
Right.
Tom Thibodeau plays his starter, especially in the playoffs. He's going to play his starters 42 minutes apiece in the postseason. Right. Quickley's a really good player who's getting better. He's getting better as a rim converter. He's added sort of a mid-range game to his repertoire. So I'm also just a huge stand for guys like Emmanuel Quickley, just sort of that combo guard who can make plays and plays with energy. I think that type of guy would work really well around Anthony Edwards. But yeah, to your point, it's hard because you're trying to figure out, in a perfect world, you wouldn't feel forced to trade Towns if you don't want to. But one thing Tim Connelly did say that was striking to me, and I'm not sure if he meant it specifically or if he was just talking generally. He said, we want to surround Anthony Edwards with winning players to maximize, because a lot of guys take their lumps, and as they develop, they're losing a bunch of games, and then they just don't become the best version of themselves, or they don't learn how to win. Is he referring to this roster specifically? Because you could make a very strong case, whether it's his fault or the organization's. Karl-Anthony Towns, by definition, is not a winning basketball player. He's been in the NBA for 8 years, and Timberwolves teams, when he plays in a game, are 60-plus games under 500 in those 8 years. So does and now you and I can't answer this question. I'd love to ask Tim. He he thinks Rudy's a winning player because those Jazz teams constantly went to the playoffs. They were always winning or flirting with 50 wins, right? So he thinks Rudy's a winning player. That's why he acquired Rudy. Does he think Cat is a winning player? Because again, he said specifically, we want to surround Ant with winning players. Tim Connelly, do you think Karl-Anthony Towns is a winning player? And I'd be curious to know, he'd never give you an answer in public, right? What is his in private answer to that question?
And it's very much chicken and egg, right? Because you can't,
yeah,
we do it all the time, but like we can't rip the Timberwolves for 34 years of dysfunction and, chaos, and then also be like, well, and this is just an open conversation, and then like blame Karl. Like Andrew Wiggins wasn't a winning player, but then we found out that if he just went to a more stable organization, it's like, oh, actually he knows how to like. Again,
he knows how to, as like a third or fourth complementary piece. Yeah. He's absolutely a winning piece to a championship team. Yes.
Right. And so same with Karl is like that. And that's why I've said this before. I have a soft spot in my fandom heart for him, is because I do think there's one side of it's like, yeah, he's gotten paid $250 million in his career. Like, figure it out. Totally get that. But I also think in like my work, it's nice to work for a place that's stable and, has communication and like there's good vibes. And Karl's been through 7 GMs in 8 years and a half dozen coaches. So that's something for Tim to figure out. It's, is it the chicken or is it the egg? Is it Karl's not a winning player or we haven't been a winning organization? There's probably a combination of both. But I just think that if a Karl trade happens, a Rudy trade happens, any trade happens, we now kind of have a clarity that it will be in the prism of what return is going to help Ant take another leap. And also too, just like what players or what types of things do we want to put around him? I'm not ready to cut the cord on Karl yet because I want to see that, like, I don't want to be like, well, we made a mistake with Rudy and now we're going to make another mistake by, well, if his value has decreased so much in this market, we got to trade the other guy. So it'll be an interesting summer. I know Doogie had Bobby Marks on the Scoop the other day, and Bobby Marks was like, it's a lot easier to trade Karl now than it is next summer because his contract really balloons next year. And that's true, but we'll see. There's a chance that because Mark Lowry is heavily involved in this now and only getting more involved, that they might just try to quote unquote run it back with some more complementary pieces. You obviously have Mike Conley in there now, who fits much better than D'Lo. Maybe grow some of the younger guys you brought in, like Wendell Moore can replace Jordan McLaughlin. Josh Minott can get some run. Naz Reid, I think, is the number one topic all summer. Even more than like a potential blockbuster trade. It's like, that guy was really good and you developed him. Can you keep him here? So it's going to be a crazy offseason. But I think the thing they'll prioritize first is trying to keep their own guys, Naz, and then, see what the market is. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I don't know how much you've been following the NBA because you've been just hosting, packed events for football. But
just been talking about fifth-round draft pick quarterbacks for the last week, pretty much. Yeah.
There's already been a ton of steam, if you're a Wolves fan that you don't really cover the NBA or follow the NBA in the offseason, that like Donovan Mitchell, the first chance he gets is out of Cleveland. And they just traded for Donovan Mitchell last year, and they gave up what I would argue is the same level of they gave up the most improved player in the league in marketing and a really good rookie and a bunch of picks as well. So between, you said Jaylen Brown, the James Harden noise to Houston, Trae Young out of Atlanta. I mean, there's so many guys this summer already that are going to be the next to ask out or be involved in these big trades. So long story short, if they trade Karl, I'm a firm believer that they're going to get a ton of value because you still just get value for really good players, even if we haven't proven yet that they're winning players. Trae Young hasn't really proven to me that he's a winning player, but he's going to get a ton in the open market if he's put on the trade table.
Yeah, so that'll be something to watch, the Karl-Anthony Towns situation this offseason, or maybe it'll just be all quiet. I want to play a little game here with you in a second. I'm going to shout out one of our new partners here on Flagrant Howls while you pull up Jaden McDaniels' basketball reference page.
Got it.
Go to the per game section because I want to do a player A, player B blind test with you in a second here.
I love this.
But a shout out to our new friends at Power Lodge and Miller Marine. Okay, if you're looking for some throttle therapy, some water therapy, listen, Wolves fans, there's nothing more relaxing when you're trying to kick the sting of another disappointing season than getting out on a lake. There's a lot of them in the state of Minnesota, and picking your power. So this weekend, now through Saturday, May 6th, is your last chance to cruise on the lake in style and save money doing it. It's the Power Lodge Miller Marine Power Sale. And during this sale, you can find your boat or pontoon. I'm a big pontoon guy myself, Kyle. I just love
them.
Just a koozie and a pontoon and some sunshine, and I am off to the races. Whatever boat or pontoon is right for you and your next Remember When family moment. And thanks again to Power Lodge and Miller Marine for jumping on board here at SKOR North and on Flagrant Howls. Head to powerlodge.com or millermarine.com to check out their inventory and selection. So, all right, you got Jaden McDaniels up there?
Yes, sir.
So I think real quick before we do the player comparison here, he's up for a big contract. And I believe Bobby Marks on that Scoop podcast with Doogie said it could be a 4-year deal, could also be a 5-year deal, and it's almost certainly going to be in the $20 to $25 million per year range. So Jaden McDaniels is going to go from a guy that, hey, kind of a late first round steal, a really interesting role player, gets to kind of settle in first 3 years and becomes one of the best defensive, just a really good role player with emphasis on defense, and his three-point shot came around. But he's going to be making the type of money to the salary cap starting soon if you pay him, and I think they will. Tim Connelly said, the first day that we're allowed to do this officially, we're going to offer him a Brinks truck worth of money, and hopefully he says yes. He is a sneaky, underrated, huge wild card for this franchise. Oh, yeah. Because he could explode into something much bigger. If he stays the same, I don't know that he's worth a 4 or 5 year, $100 million contract. But you're sitting here like, who can be the Robin to Anthony Edwards' Batman for the next 5 or 6 years? It could be him, or he could be a sort of overpaid role player that you thought was going to be more than he was, right? So before we get into the player comparison, I'm so fascinated to see what they do with Jaden McDaniels and what he becomes as a player starting this season.
If you haven't listened to Doogie's podcast with Bobby Marks, everyone should. It was really good. Not to scoop our own friend, but I got drunk a couple weeks ago and tried DMing Bobby Marks, and he got back to me. So we were talking about that too, and he brought up
Bobby, are you up?
It was at 11:59 p.m. on the West Coast, which I have another topic on that. But so I just DM'd him, and he said this. He said the same thing. He's like, that kind of DeAndre Hunter extension for 110, 4 years, $110 million, or the 130. Because as Doogie and Bobby talk about, like the new CBA allows for that 5th year, so that'd be great because you always want to lock up these guys if you do think that they're more of a foundational piece and not a wild card for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. But then Bobby also brought it up too. He's like, it's going to get this team. We just talked about Karl-Anthony Towns trades, whatever. This team is going to get really expensive, really fast. So if they do sign Ant and they do sign Jaden and they don't make any big trades, Bobby was saying that $150+ million committed to 4 guys in 24-25. That's going to make you, before you even try to fill out the rest of the roster, that's going to make you a tax team. And now there's like the second tax or this whatever. It's going to be something that we talk about a lot next season on this pod and throughout the fan base is this final step in the transition of new ownership. And it's like, okay, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez have got a lot, they have to take their shoes off, they get to fly on the plane, they get to wear the polos, they get to do all the cool stuff, but no longer is it like at the end of the day, well, Papa Glenn's going to pay for it. Like that's going to be on you. So that is a massive, massive thing to think about. But I'm very much in the camp. People know this. I don't think Jaden McDaniels is a wild card in my opinion. I mean, I think he's in my opinion, I think he's the second most important person to the franchise. If we know that everything's about Ant, and you're going to hit me with some comps, but he's 22.
Here, let's do it.
Hit me.
I think this will be a fun exercise. So so I just want you to read down. You're on the per game section of Jaden McDaniels, right?
Yep.
I want you to look at his third year, so this last year. I'm going to go through some different categories, and just to make it less mathy for the audience, just round up or down to the nearest whole number when I ask you.
Okay.
So instead of saying 1.9 assists, you can just round it to 2.
That's how my
so
brain
we can
works.
Not confuse people. All right, so I'm going to give you a category. You give me the number for Jaden McDaniels in that category per game, and I'll give you the number for player B. All right?
Okay.
So third season in the NBA, age.
22.
22. Minutes per game.
31.
29. Okay.
Okay.
Field goals per game.
Field goal, 9.
Oh, actual makes per game.
Oh, okay. 5.
5. Interesting. What about how about field goal percentage?
52%.
52% on mine too is crazy. What about 3-point percentage?
Wow. 40% from 3 this season. Incredible.
38% for my player. Pretty good. Okay, what about 2-point percentage?
59%. A career high.
58%. A career high also at this point in this player's career. Wow, are you sure? Am I reading Jaden McDaniels third year? It's crazy. What about let's go free throw percentage?
74% on the season.
80%. So my guy has you slightly there, but both pretty good. What about total rebounds per game?
4 rebounds a game.
6 for my guy, so a little bit better.
Yeah.
How about assists?
2 career high, 2 assists.
2 for my guy as well. Okay. What about combined steals and blocks per game?
Just under 2. So 2 stocks, blocks and steals combined.
2.5 exactly for mine.
Okay.
So wow, this is kind of crazy actually. Okay, what about points per game?
A career high 12 points after he had 7 his rookie year, 9 his second year, and 12 last year.
12.5 for my guy.
Okay.
Crazy. So pretty much the same player at age. And by the way, first round pick for me, but not lottery.
Okay, I was gonna say,
Jaden
God, if you're about to
McDaniels,
hit
right?
me with if you're about to hit me with this is all Wes Johnson's third year, I'm gonna be hella sad.
Dude.
But that's not where we're going. Okay, keep it positive.
Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, yes.
Both quiet, both nondescript, both not lottery picks. I'm not saying Jaden's for sure going to be Kawhi. I'm just saying there's some interesting comparisons through age 22 between the two guys. Now, Kawhi got to be part of the greatest developmental infrastructure in our lifetimes, right? He got to play with, all right, Kawhi, just go be Kawhi behind Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, and a bunch of other dudes. And then the responsibility fell on him probably like 2 years after this, like age 24, 25, and it became his franchise, right? But Jaden kind of reminds me of Kawhi, on-ball defender, a guy that early in his career is kind of a 3-and-D player, really quiet and soft-spoken, but a fiery passion that burns underneath, right? A mid-range game as well. So I don't know. I started looking through. I'm like, oh, how does he compare to Kawhi? Literally the same statistical player in their third year at age 22.
Yeah, and a concrete wall on defense.
Yeah, stay away from those.
Wait, actually, bad. Take that out. No, I mean, I would say too that as you start to figure out this roster, and let's say they run it back, or let's say they do trade one of their big guys down the road. I mean, you could make an argument. I mean, Ant's going to make way more money than Jaden, even though we just said Jaden's going to get a massive, massive pay raise. But I still think there's just a lot untapped. Like, I would say that, I want Jaden, as I'm probably the biggest fan of him. Like, yes, I would love for him to make 5 years, 130. Whatever it does to the books, I don't care. But I also was like, hey, I need you to just average 6 rebounds. Like, you're 6'10", and if you do trade Karl-Anthony Towns out down the road, it's like you can't have 9 field goal attempts a game. You got to get that to 12, right? You got to have.
In fact, if you traded Towns and you got back like a Jaylen Brown or like a Mikal Bridges or something like that, like a good 6'6" scoring wing player, and you figure out how to make it work with Anthony Edwards, then Jaden McDaniels either has to be a small 4 which he
Which
can't
hasn't really
rebound.
worked, yeah.
Or come off the bench for 28, 30 minutes a game as just one of the best six men in the NBA, right?
Yeah, and that's, I think, an easier way to say it is that if they do decide to unload one of the bigs, and it would maybe be Karl down the road because whether it be salary cap or just you think you can get more from him, you'd also just be like, hey, I think it's great that Jaden didn't get drafted by the Hornets, where he was just thrown into 20 and 62 teams and was allowed to just, he would average 24 a game, right? I mean, you saw what Mikal Bridges did when he went to the Nets. It's like, I don't no longer have to be the 3-and-D guy. I'm the focal point of the offense. I understand basketball just enough that's like if Jaden was in that role, he would do the same thing. He did it. I know it's not the same level of competition, but he did it in Summer League. He did it in, pro-ams where it's like, the ball is mine every possession. Like I'm Harden. Yeah, I'll go drop 55.
Score 50 points in the pro-am game with some other NBA players?
Yeah, he did it like on
like
Paolo Banchero, the rookie of the year. Like he did it up in Seattle against some of the guys that are like also really good players. So I do think you look across his basketball reference page, like I said, the points have gone up every year. Rebounds down a little bit, but how much of that is like a Gobert thing? But if he's going to make 5 years, get 5 years, 130, he can't be averaging 12 points and 4 rebounds. It's got to be, 17, 18 points a game, which there are dudes who average 20 in the league right now that are close to bums. Everyone scores. So he needs to get his scoring up. He needs to get his rebounding up. He needs to get to the line more. But I think the Kawhi Leonard stuff is like we just remember Kawhi and Paul George being awesome. And they weren't awesome like those first couple years. They were really good prospects, but they took some years to figure it out. But yeah, I really do think the Jaden McDaniels conversation is he is the second most important guy. He has shown no desire to be the face of a franchise or to be like a guy that causes issues. It's Ant's team, but you need a running mate. That's what we're learning in the playoffs now. Like Jokic has his Jamal Murray, Steph has his Clay. Like all these guys have their second guy that can do a lot of things that maybe he can't do. And Ant can guard, but he can't guard like Jaden. And in a league where, you need to have defense and get stops, some of these playoff games are 89, 87. You got to have guys that can play both ways, and Jaden would be, again, this summer's going to be big. You got to pay them both. As Tim said, they're going to have offers in their inbox. I don't know if that was actually I don't know if they're going to email these contracts to.
Yeah,
I'd love to see
like a
Jaden's
PDF file, or is it just is it a one sheet? What do you send? The full contract? I don't know.
Is it just a picture of money? I don't know. But I would love to see Jaden McDaniels just open up a Gmail account and be like, oh wow, $130 million.
The Paul George, you brought up Paul George, kind of with Kawhi Leonard, and I had forgotten. So at first I thought Paul George, I thought for some reason that he wasn't the lottery pick, that he was drafted 20th or something. He was the 10th overall pick. He was lottery pick. But it wasn't quick to fire, man. It took him his first year with the Pacers. He was 20 years old, just like Jaden. He averaged at 8 points in 21 minutes and 3 rebounds. Wasn't a great 3-point shooter. And then the second year with the Pacers, there was a little bit of a leap to 12 points. And, okay, going to grab a couple more rebounds. Now his 3-point shooting kind of came around in the second year. And, And Jaden's 3-point shooting came around a lot this year. Now it's only on 2 attempts a game. So what would it look like if he's taken 5 or 6 a game? We'd have to find out. But Paul George became an all-star in year 3. But by the time he hit 22, 23 years old, he then kind of exploded and became the player that we've seen for the last 10 years. So does Jaden McDaniels have the Kawhi, Paul George type leap to his game? I think if you look at him physically and what he can do, he can dribble drive, he can shoot, he's got a mid-range game, he can defend. I think he can rebound if it became a point of emphasis. It's funny, Andrew Wiggins couldn't rebound either until he got to a culture where they said, dude, we need you to rebound.
Right.
He's like, oh, rebounding. Okay, here's 13 in a conference finals game, right? So it's in there if he just taps into it. And
if you consider, which I do, well, especially on this roster, but if you consider Jaden to be more of a perimeter player, right, guarding guys on the perimeter, but also just being out there, that was another thing from exit interviews where I think Finch was pretty just straightforward and blunt that our guards, he said, but need to rebound better. That's one way we address that issue, and I think he threw Jaden into that mix. So another thing I like about Jaden, too, is if you go look at his, basketball reference page, he's averaging, 70-some games a season. He played 79 this last year, and I think the reason he missed a couple was maybe the flu or something. It wasn't because of the punching the wall thing, because that was more postseason. So going back to that athletic mock draft under 23, again, it's just one exercise, but they drafted him ahead of Keegan Murray or Chet Holmgren or Scotty Barnes. I mean, Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner for the Magic, those are guys that those fan bases deem foundational building blocks, potential all-star guys, and they have Jaden, in this exercise ranked above those guys. So he's probably not as important as Ant, because I don't know how many people are when you're number one 21-year-old in the league, but I think he is maybe not even a 2. Like maybe he's 1B to Ant's 1A.
In terms of franchise importance.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree for different reasons. I mean, Ant as the heavy load offensively and just the superstar, volume usage player, but Jaden as a guy that you really, if you want this timeline to line up, that Anthony Edwards is going to be at his prime in 5 or 6 years, Jaden McDaniels being the Robin would be the best case scenario. So two guys that I'm going to unfortunately say goodbye to here. This is my last thought, and we can. By the way, if you guys have thoughts, the audience out there, on what you want us to talk about or guests you'd like us to have on throughout the offseason, we will do Flagrant Howls weekly.
Yep.
Maybe even more once we get to like free agency season. But just hit us up with ideas and suggestions of what you want us to talk about, and we will address it. But two guys that I was probably unnecessarily high on throughout the year and going into last year, I got to clear them off the roster. One of them's a free agent. The other one's got a non-guarantee contract. Pour one out for Jalen Noel and Jordan McLaughlin. I think I'm saying goodbye to both those guys.
Jalen Noel is like 100% gone. I think it will probably be best for him, too, to go to a new organization. I thought the Wolves actually did a pretty good job of developing him. He was kind of a steal in the second round. I remember back then, like, they kind of played hardball with his contract. He does not lack confidence in himself, to the point where I wonder if sometimes his confidence gets in the way of, like, development. I remember at media day, it was like, hey, you've really kind of maybe struggled from, like, a spot-up 3 standpoint, and you're going to get a lot of those. Maybe change your shot a little bit. He's like, no, why would I do that? It's like, well, if you go look at your statistics, like, you weren't really letting it fly from out there, burning down the net. So he's gone. I wish him well, because he's a really cool player to talk to, and I think he was a nice little fixture for these last 3 or 4 years. And then the Jordan McLaughlin thing, I wonder if his calf held him back a little bit. He had kind of a similar Karl-Anthony Towns calf injury, but if he's back, and I like him a lot, he's like a great pillar of the community. If he's back, then like what's Wendell Moore's role?
Yeah.
So at a bare minimum, if you're like, well, what do they do with Wendell Moore in year 2? Give him the Jordan McLaughlin minutes, give him, spot minutes off the bench, maybe, higher in games that Mike Conley needs a blow or just doesn't want to, can't play all 82. But I would be absolutely shocked if either of those guys is back next season.
Yeah. It was really rough watching Jordan McLaughlin just wide open in the corner in some of these big games, just not being able to hit the broad side of the barn. So you got to be able to hit some shots. And I do think getting more, further removed from the calf injury, will he go back for some team to just being a really good 15 minutes off the bench guy that can keep the offense moving? Yes, but at the end of the day, like you got to shoot the ball. The Wolves have had so many interesting players that can't shoot over the last 10 years. Yeah, boy, if that guy could just knock a jump shot down, could you imagine how good of a player he would be? Even going back to like Corey Brewer. Corey Brewer dropped 50 points in a game one time and couldn't shoot.
Or like either they get to Minnesota and they can't shoot, or like in Mike Miller's case, he was a flamethrower and they just don't shoot. So even that's been my quarries with Karl, has been like, you're the quote-unquote best shooting big man of all time. Why are we just not shooting 9 threes a game? So I'm very confident both those guys will find roles. I mean, the Phoenix Suns would love a guy like Jordan McLaughlin off the bench just to kind of keep people, he's dollar store Tyus Jones. And Jalen Noel too. He'll find a spot. He would probably benefit from like a Hornets situation where it's like, we're probably going to go 25 and 55 or whatever, but we'll get you 20 minutes a game. And that way you can kind of build yourself back up, because it was less than a year ago, Phil, when Chris Finch called Jalen like a core part of the franchise, and it's like, well, then you just started DNPing him. So
it's like his shot looks great oftentimes, but he just couldn't figure it out. So and by the way, if you guys could also too, if you're hanging out with us on YouTube, if you could click the subscribe button and the like button on the SKOR North YouTube channel, help spread the word about Flagrant Howls. And we're going to try and get this thing as high as we can throughout the offseason on the Apple charts as well. So
yes,
a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts goes a long way to growing this show. Any final thoughts from you here as we embark into off-season conversations on this show?
Yeah, I feel like Doogie today. I'm just going into my notes here. Alexei Shved, I don't know if you remember him, but
I saw a TMZ report. He got beat up outside a hospital?
Yeah, I think he's actually doing some cool stuff. Like, I think he's back in Russia. He had like opened his own restaurant or something. He had gotten like jumped by like they had described it as hooligans. But it sounds like his health is kind of in dire straits. But he was one of my first like, oh, that guy, if he just does this, the Wolves might have found a guy. That's back in the early stages where you kind of grasp to the fringe bench players to be like, maybe he's the hope for this franchise. But I liked watching him, and I was a bummer to see that he's kind of going through some health stuff right now. Did you see that Tim Connelly received a third-place vote for Executive of the Year?
I did see that. What do you think that's all about?
There's two ways I can think of it. Either Danny Ainge voted for him, just as an absolute joke, or this is what I really believe, and we'll get into this in the summer, but I think there are, because that is not a media vote, that is executives give other executives votes. I think there's more teams out there that maybe liked what the Wolves did. I mean, all the fans are like, that was one of the worst trades in NBA history. Mm-hmm. But I think there's some GMs out there that are always like, if we got that guy in our system, like we like that Tim tried to have two big guys. So
and then the Conley D'Lo trade, getting Nah and some second round picks, right?
It just makes you wonder, like, if they do decide to maybe flirt with what's the market like for Rudy, even though he's 70 cents on the dollar. I wonder if
go call the team that voted for you.
Yeah,
third
exactly.
place.
Exactly. And then I'm going to start doing this in the summer, but I'm going to throw you a random question at the end to just get the commenters engaged. I stole this from Ryan Russillo, but as someone who used to live out here in my neighborhood, now you're back in the Central Time Zone. They had a little discussion on the Russillo pod on Life of Ice about the best time zone for sports.
Oh, West Coast.
Okay, I knew you were going to.
Is there any other answer to that?
It
can't be East Coast.
They said Mountain Time, which is kind of, obviously literally in the middle, but I am a Midwesterner through and through. I love my home state and my home region, but I just want to for the 5 people that there is not a better time zone for football, for basketball, for hockey than the West Coast.
Yeah, well, football at 10 o'clock in the morning.
It's great. People that don't get it, we're all adults now. We all get up at 6:37 even when we're hungover. A couple hours, make some breakfast, get some chores done, football.
And also, sports are done by the time 8 o'clock rolls around. Maybe 10 o'clock for the late night games. The late night games, which are 7 o'clock games on the West Coast. So, yeah, dude, I'm still – so we've been back for 3 months now in Minneapolis, and it's been great. Love it. Like today, 77 degrees, sunshine. Let's get it. But I still struggle with these late night tips. I wanted so badly to watch Lakers Warriors, but God, I'm like, this game's gonna go till 12:30. Got meetings in the morning. Got to get rocking and rolling. So it is. It's a little tougher, but yeah, West Coast sports viewing.
Again, I don't disparage anyone in the Midwest, but it's just it's a tough hang. Or going back to the 4 time zones. Anyone that's listening from the East Coast, we love you listening and partaking in this conversation. That is such a terrible time zone for sports. It's not even in the ring. If this is a battle between the Central Time Zone and the West Coast Time Zone, the East Coast Time Zone can't even hang because sucks.
Yeah, so you're telling me these West Coast playoff games are like some of these Wolves Nuggets games, right? They're tipping off at 10:40 Eastern time. It's insane.
So the Nuggets and Suns have a weird schedule. They don't play till Friday. But that's a 10 o'clock tip. I don't even care if it's a Friday. 10 o'clock tip for a game that can go 3.5 hours. So I just wanted to get your opinion. I'll bring you better ones. That was kind of a softball. But
no, I like it. Bring some random questions. Yes.
We've done the would you rather fight a shark or a bear, and now we'll do time zones, and I'll come up with something for next week.
Love it, man. Awesome. Well, thanks to everyone for making this podcast a thing over the last year, despite the Timberwolves season coming to an end in a shorter fashion than we wanted. But we're here all off season. We'll have a ton of speculation, and we'll get some guests on the show as well. So for Kyle, I'm Phil. This is your favorite, hopefully, Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, Flagrant Howls.